Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring early childhood development. All those incredible changes that happen between ages 2 and 6. Think of this as your crash course on little minds and bodies growing. And we've got an expert here who's amazing at taking, really complex topics and making them clear and insightful.
Oh, well, thanks. Early childhood is so dynamic, it really shapes everything that comes after.
Okay, so I got to admit something. I always picture kids between 2 and 6 as being kind of, chubby. But the textbook we're using says they actually slim down during those years. Isn't that kind of the opposite of what we usually think?
It might seem that way, but even though they're gaining height and weight, their body proportions change. Like their legs get longer and they start to lose that baby fat. So their BMI, their body mass index, actually goes down.
That's a good point. It's easy to just focus on how they look. But this textbook also talks about this thing called the nutrition paradox. It says that both malnutrition and obesity are more common in lower income families. How can that be?
Well, it comes down to access and resources, unfortunately. Lower income families often struggle to afford healthy foods. They might rely more on cheaper options, that are high in calories but not very nutritious. Plus, they might live in areas where fresh fruits and vegetables are harder to find.
It's really tough to think that, some kids are basically set up to struggle from the very beginning just because of their circumstances. The textbook also says that most kids in developed countries, DO, get enough calories, but sugar is a big problem. I mean, you think about it, birthday parties, holidays, even just the grocery store, there's sugar everywhere.
It's true. It's really baked into our culture, and it's tough to avoid. But all that sugar, it's not just empty calories. It can lead to problems down the road. Obesity, heart disease, even type 2 diabetes. And we're seeing those issues starting earlier and earlier.
Okay, I'm officially putting down the donut.
Yeah.
Speaking of things that affect a child's health, the textbook also mentions food allergies. Is it just me, or are we hearing about food allergies more and more these days?
No, you're right. Food allergies are on the rise. It's important to be aware of them. Somewhere between 3 and 8% of young kids have at least one food allergy. And for some kids, these allergies can be really serious, even life-threatening. Parents and caregivers need to know the signs and symptoms and, talk to their doctor if they think there might be an allergy.
That's really good advice. So we've talked about what kids are putting into their bodies, but what about what's going on inside their brains? I was shocked to learn that a 2-year-old's brain is already 75% of its adult weight.
Huh.
What's driving all that growth so early on?
Yeah, it's incredible how much development happens so early. A lot of that growth is due to this process called myelination. Imagine you have all these electrical wires and you want to make sure the signals travel quickly. You'd wrap them in insulation, right? That's kind of what myelin does for the brain. It's a fatty coating that forms on nerve fibers, which speeds up the transmission of signals. Faster signals mean faster thinking.
Okay, that makes sense. So can you give us an example of how this plays out in a kid's life?
Sure. Think about a 2-year-old trying to do a simple puzzle. They might take a while, get frustrated, need a lot of help. But by the time they're 5, with all that extra myelin, they can zip through that same puzzle. Their processing speed has just skyrocketed.
Right. You know how a 2-year-old can barely follow simple instructions, but a 5-year-old can, manage a multi-step task?
Yeah.
That's myelination.
Exactly.
Amazing. Okay, so I have to ask about something that always fascinated me, the whole left brain, right brain thing. The textbook talks about the corpus callosum, that bridge between the two hemispheres. Is that where this idea comes from?
It is, but honestly, the whole left brain, right brain thing is a bit of a myth. It's way too simplistic. Yes, the two hemispheres have some specialized functions, but they work together for almost everything.
Wait, are you saying the left brain, right brain thing is bogus? I always thought it was more creative because I'm right-brained.
Think of it more like a team effort than a competition. Both sides of your brain are involved in creativity, logic, pretty much everything.
Well, that definitely busts a few myths for me. Yeah. So let's talk about another part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. The textbook calls it the CEO of the brain. It sounds pretty important. What's going on in that area between 2 and 6?
The prefrontal cortex is like the control center for planning, thinking, social awareness, language, all that stuff. And it's developing a lot during those years. That's why young kids are often impulsive. The prefrontal cortex is still under construction.
So that explains those epic meltdowns when they don't get their way?
Exactly. It also explains why accidents are so common in this age group. Their brains aren't totally equipped to handle all those impulses, so adults have to be extra vigilant about safety.
That makes sense. The textbook also mentions impulsivity and something called perseveration. What's that all about?
Impulsivity is acting without thinking, like grabbing a cookie before dinner or running into the street. Perseveration is kind of the opposite. It's getting stuck on a thought or action, like wanting to wear the same shirt every day or repeating a phrase over and over. They're both tied to that developing prefrontal cortex, which is still learning to balance everything out.
Wow, so their brains are basically juggling all these new skills and trying to keep everything in sync. That makes me think about how stress must affect them. I mean, even adults struggle with stress. And the textbook says that even young kids aren't immune to it.
You're right. Stress can have a huge impact on a developing brain. It's not just the big traumatic events either. Even everyday stressors like family arguments, starting school, moving to a new house, it can all affect them. And what's even more important is how adults respond to stress. That really shapes a child's experience.
So what's the best way to help kids deal with stress? I remember my parents always telling me to calm down when I was little, but I don't think that was very helpful.
Yeah, that's a common mistake. Telling a kid to calm down usually does the opposite. What they need is a balance of arousal and reassurance. Acknowledge their feelings, help them understand what's happening, and then offer comfort. It's about helping them learn to regulate their own emotions. But it's a two-way street. If the adults in their lives are stressed all the time, that makes it harder for the child.
That makes total sense. The textbook mentioned a study on low SES families where the kids' brains actually became less reactive to stress over time. That almost sounds like a good thing, right?
It's complicated. It might seem protective in the short term, but it could also mean they're learning to shut down emotionally to cope. And that can have serious consequences for their mental and physical health later on. This study actually found that for these kids, lower stress hormones were linked to problems with memory.
Huh. It's interesting. It makes me think of my friend who grew up in a really tough neighborhood. He always says he had to develop a thick skin to survive. I wonder if it's kind of what this study's getting at.
Yeah, it's possible. It shows how experience can actually change how a child's brain responds to stress, and not always in a good way.
That's a pretty sobering thought. So we've talked a lot about the mental and emotional development going on during these years, but let's not forget about physical growth. Kids this age are constantly on the go, and their gross motor skills are developing like crazy.
Well, absolutely. Between 2 and 6, they're mastering skills like running, jumping, climbing, throwing, all those activities that use the big muscles.
It's like they have endless energy.
Yeah.
Do you think all that running around also helps their brains develop?
It definitely does. It's all connected. Brain maturation, motivation, guided practice, it all plays a role. And we can't forget about environment and culture. Think about the differences between, say, a kid who grows up in the city versus one who grows up in the country, or a kid who has playgrounds versus one who doesn't.
Right. It makes a huge difference. Now, I know from experience that those fine motor skills, the ones that involve all those tiny hand and finger movements, those take a little longer to develop. Why is that?
Well, fine motor skills are more challenging because they often require both sides of the brain to work together. It's like this complex dance of coordination between the two hemispheres.
So, is it true that girls develop those fine motor skills earlier than boys?
There is some truth to that. On average, girls develop fine motor skills about 6 months earlier than boys. It's not a massive difference, but it's interesting.
It is interesting. Okay, we need to shift gears for a second, talk about something a bit more serious. Childhood injuries and accidents. The textbook says that accidents are the leading cause of death for young children, which is pretty scary.
It is a harsh reality. But the good news is that a lot of those accidents are preventable.
So what can parents and caregivers do to keep those little adventurers safe?
Well, it starts with creating safe environments. Think safety surfaces on playgrounds, car seats, bike helmets, keeping medications locked up, never leaving kids alone around water. It's also about understanding their developmental stage. A 2-year-old understands danger very differently than a 5-year-old, so you have to adapt your approach.
All right, that's so important. It's easy to get complacent when you're busy, but you can't let your guard down. I like how the textbook breaks down injury prevention into 3 levels: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Can you walk us through those?
Sure. Primary prevention is about tackling the bigger issues that contribute to accidents. Things like promoting neighborhood safety, supporting strong families, reducing poverty, those systemic factors that can increase or decrease a child's risk.
That's really interesting, but also kind of frustrating. It feels like we're fighting an uphill battle if poverty itself is making kids less safe. Are there any policies or programs that are actually making a difference in this area?
There are, but it's a constant effort. We need to invest in things like early childhood education, affordable childcare, social safety nets to help families.
So it's about creating a society that supports families, especially those who are struggling. What about secondary prevention?
Secondary prevention is about identifying and addressing specific risks within a family or for an individual child. This could involve things like screening for developmental delays, providing parenting support, intervening in cases of insecure attachment, catching potential problems early before they get worse.
And finally, there's tertiary prevention.
Right. Tertiary prevention is all about damage control. It's what we do after an injury has already happened. It involves things like medical attention, emotional support, rehabilitation. The goal is to minimize the harm and help the child recover.
So this is where that golden hour concept comes in, right?
Right.
That first hour after an injury is so crucial for getting the right care.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've covered the 3 levels of prevention. Let's talk about a specific hazard lead poisoning. I know it used to be a much bigger problem, but is it still something we need to worry about today?
Absolutely. Lead poisoning is a silent threat that can have lifelong consequences, especially for young children. It can damage their brain, their kidneys, their nervous system. Even low levels of lead exposure can cause problems with learning, behavior, and development.
The textbook mentions something called toxic shrinkage. What is that exactly?
Imagine lead like a bully in the brain. It actually shrinks important areas of the brain that are responsible for things like learning and memory. The book actually shows a brain scan of an adult who was exposed to high levels of lead as a child. And you can see the areas of the brain that are smaller than normal because of the lead exposure.
That's scary stuff.
Yeah.
But it sounds like we've made some progress in reducing lead exposure in recent years, right?
We have, thanks to laws and regulations based on scientific evidence. We've banned lead paint, reduced lead in gasoline, and taken other steps to make our environment safer. But we can't get complacent. Lead is still present in some older homes and environments, so awareness and prevention are key.
It's a good reminder that even when we made progress, there's still work to do. Okay, it's time to talk about another difficult topic, child maltreatment. It's a tough subject, but we can't ignore it.
You're right. Child maltreatment is a serious issue with long-term consequences. It can take many forms: physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and neglect.
The textbook makes a distinction between reported and substantiated maltreatment. Can you explain that for our listeners?
Sure. So when someone reports suspected child maltreatment, it triggers an investigation by Child Protective Services. But not all reports are substantiated. That means the authorities haven't confirmed that abuse or neglect has actually occurred.
So there's a process in place to protect kids and make sure reports are taken seriously. But what makes it so hard to identify maltreatment in the first place?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is that kids, especially young kids, may not be able to or may be afraid to report abuse themselves. They might not understand what's happening, or they might be scared of what will happen if they tell someone.
It's so sad to think about those kids suffering in silence. What are some signs that someone might suspect maltreatment is happening?
There are a lot of potential red flags. Unexplained injuries, changes in behavior, developmental delays, withdrawal from social interactions, things like that. If you notice anything that seems off, trust your gut and report it.
That's great advice. We all have a responsibility to protect children. The longer maltreatment goes on, the more potential there is for lasting harm.
Absolutely. Early intervention is crucial.
Speaking of lasting harm, the textbook really paints a bleak picture of the long-term consequences of maltreatment.
Yeah, unfortunately, the effects of maltreatment can be really devastating. Children who have been maltreated are at higher risk for a whole range of problems later in life. Mental health issues, substance abuse, criminal behavior, even physical health problems.
Wow, so how might those consequences show up in a person's everyday life?
They might struggle to form healthy relationships, have trouble regulating their emotions, experience anxiety and depression. They might engage in self-destructive behaviors, have difficulty holding down a job. The scars of maltreatment can really run deep.
It's heartbreaking to think about the impact those early experiences can have. So, what happens when a child has experienced maltreatment? What are the options for finding them a safe and permanent home?
There are several approaches. We have permanency planning, which is about finding the best long-term living situation for a child who can't stay with their biological parents. There's foster care, which involves placing a child temporarily with a trained and licensed caregiver. Kinship care means placing the child with relatives or close family friends. And then there's adoption, the legal process of permanently transferring parental rights to another family.
So each approach has its own nuances and potential benefits and drawbacks.
Yeah.
What are some of the factors that go into deciding which approach is best for a particular child?
It's a complex process. You have to consider the child's age, their needs, their history, the availability of suitable placements, the resources of the child welfare system. The goal is to find the most stable and nurturing environment possible so the child can heal and thrive.
It sounds like there's a lot of work to be done to improve the systems of care and support for these vulnerable children. Are there any, innovations or best practices that are showing promise?
There are. Some states are trying out new models of foster care that focus on keeping siblings together or providing more therapeutic support for kids who have experienced trauma. There's also a growing movement to prioritize kinship care, which can offer more stability and cultural continuity.
It's encouraging to hear that people are working to create better solutions. We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive into early childhood development, from the incredible growth of the brain to the challenges of malnutrition and the heartbreak of maltreatment. It's clear that these early years are a time of both immense potential and vulnerability.
You're absolutely right. It's a critical period that really shapes the trajectory of a child's life.
Welcome back to the deep dive. It's amazing how much we've covered already, from brain development and nutrition to the threats of accidents and maltreatment.
Yeah, it's a lot to process, but super important. These early years are the foundation for everything.
Absolutely. And as we keep exploring early childhood development, I think it's important to remember, it's not just about avoiding the negative stuff. It's also about fostering positive growth, helping kids reach their full potential.
That's a great point. So can we shift gears a bit and talk about some of the amazing things happening in a child's brain between 2 and 6? I mean, we already touched on how much their brains are growing, but what about the new skills and abilities?
Well, one of the most remarkable developments is the growth of executive functions. Those are like the mental tools kids use to plan, organize, focus, control impulses, and remember things.
Okay, executive functions sounds important, but I gotta admit, that's a little jargony for me. Can you explain it in simpler terms? Sure. Think of it like this. Executive functions are like the air traffic control tower of the brain. They help manage incoming information, make decisions, keep things running smoothly. They allow kids to shift between tasks, resist distractions, remember what they need to do.
So when a kid can finally put their toys away without getting totally sidetracked, that's executive function.
Exactly. And as those functions develop, you'll see kids become more independent, follow instructions better, and solve problems more effectively.
Wow, it's amazing to think all that's happening in their little brains. I bet play is a big part in this, right? Developing those executive functions, I mean.
Absolutely. Play is essential for development in general, but especially for executive functions. When kids pretend play, they plan scenarios, take on roles, follow rules. They're constantly using those mental muscles.
I see why playtime is so crucial. It's not just fun, it's actually building their brains. So what can parents and caregivers do to help develop these executive functions?
One of the best things is to give them chances to practice these skills in everyday life. Encourage them to help with chores, give them simple instructions, play games that involve planning and problem solving.
So giving them age-appropriate challenges and letting them figure things out.
Exactly. And remember, it's okay for them to struggle a bit. Mistakes are part of learning.
Right, good point. I think sometimes we adults try to do too much for kids, trying to make things easier, but maybe we're not letting them face challenges they need.
I think that's right. Sometimes we need to step back and let them learn through trial and error. Builds resilience, builds confidence.
Okay, we talked about executive functions, but what about language development? Kids this age are like sponges, soaking up words so fast.
It's incredible. Their vocabulary explodes during these years. By 6, they can understand and use thousands of words, and they're starting to get more complex grammar.
So how can we help them build these language skills? Reading to them is important, but is there anything else?
Reading is crucial. It exposes them to so much vocabulary and sentence structures. But everyday conversations are just as important. Talk to them about their day, ask questions, encourage them to tell stories.
So not just reading to them, but engaging them in back and forth conversation.
Precisely. And don't be afraid to use big words. You might be surprised how much they understand.
Good point. I think we often underestimate kids. We dumb things down, but they're capable of learning so much more.
Totally. They're little learning machines, constantly absorbing everything.
Okay, we've covered reading, conversation, and play. Now, what about screen time? That's a big topic these days. Is there a magic number for young kids?
It's a tough one, no easy answer. But the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends no screen time before 18 months, except video chatting. For 2 to 5-year-olds, they say limit it to an hour a day of high-quality stuff. And they emphasize watching together so you can help them understand what they're seeing.
So it's not just about the time, but also what they're watching and how it's used.
Exactly. And remember, screen time shouldn't replace real-world interactions. Kids need to play, explore, engage with their surroundings.
Yeah, I get it. Sometimes it's easy to use screens as a crutch, keep them busy while we do other things. But we need to be careful it doesn't replace other important activities.
I agree. It's all about finding that balance.
So we've discussed executive functions, language, play, screen time. These are all huge for development. But I'm also curious about the emotional side. What's going on in their emotional world during this time?
One big milestone is the development of self-regulation. That's the ability to manage your emotions, both good and bad ones.
So when a kid can finally calm down after a tantrum, that's self-regulation.
You got it. And it's crucial for their well-being, socially and emotionally. It helps them interact appropriately, cope with stress, build healthy relationships.
Sounds like a super important life skill. But how does it develop? Can we teach it, or does it just happen naturally?
It's a bit of both. Kids are born with different temperaments. Some are naturally more chill, but environment plays a huge role. Responsive caregiving is essential.
What does responsive caregiving look like? Can you give us an example?
Sure, imagine a toddler having a meltdown because they can't have a cookie before dinner. A responsive caregiver would acknowledge the feelings. I know you're upset, you want a cookie, but also set limits. It's not time yet, we'll have them after dinner. Maybe offer comfort and distraction, want to help me set the table, and avoid harsh punishment or making them feel bad for their emotions.
So it's validating their feelings while also setting boundaries and teaching healthy ways to express themselves.
Exactly. It's about helping them understand their emotions and learn how to cope.
I see. It's a delicate balance. Not dismissing their emotions, but not letting them take over either.
It is. Takes practice, takes patience. But most kids will develop self-regulation skills with the right support.
Okay, so self-regulation is key. What about other emotional milestones? What else is happening in their emotional world?
Another big one is the development of empathy, understanding, and sharing the feelings of others.
Like when a kid sees another kid crying and tries to comfort them.
Exactly. Empathy is the foundation for being helpful, sharing, cooperating. It's key for healthy relationships.
It's so sweet to see those early signs of empathy. Makes you hopeful.
Yeah.
But how do we encourage it? Can we teach it, or is it just innate?
Like most things, it's a mix of both. Some kids are naturally more empathetic, but we can definitely nurture it with our words and actions. Talk to kids about their feelings and the feelings of others. Model empathy ourselves. Read stories that explore emotions and different points of view.
So creating an environment where empathy is valued.
Yes. And remember, empathy is a skill. It develops over time. Young kids are still learning to separate their own feelings from others, so it's okay if they don't always get it right. Just keep talking about it, model it, give them chances to practice.
That's helpful. Yeah. I think we sometimes expect too much from little kids emotionally. They're still figuring things out. But it's good to know we can help them build these crucial skills. You know, this whole conversation makes me think about how important early childhood education is. It's not just academics, it's the social, emotional, physical stuff too.
Absolutely. Early childhood education is crucial for all those areas, and good quality programs can have a lasting impact.
So what should parents look for in a program? What are the signs of a good one?
Several things. First, qualified and experienced teachers who are passionate about working with little kids. Second, a developmentally appropriate curriculum focusing on the whole child's social, emotional, physical, and cognitive development. And third, a positive and supportive environment where kids feel safe, respected, and encouraged to explore and learn.
So it's not just about convenience or cost, but finding the right fit for the child.
Exactly. Do your research, visit different programs, get a feel for what they're like.
Great advice. Sometimes we get so caught up in the logistics of childcare that we forget about the quality. But it's so important for our kids to be in an environment where they can thrive. Well, we've covered a lot in this part. From executive functions and language to play, screen time, self-regulation, and empathy, it's clear these early years are jam-packed with growth and change.
It's a really exciting time to be learning about early childhood development. There's so much research happening, new insights all the time.
It's amazing how much these little ones are capable of. And it's our responsibility to give them the love, support, and opportunities they need to truly flourish. What are some key takeaways for our listeners?
The biggest takeaway is that early childhood is crucial, but it's also a time of joy and wonder. Embrace those moments of discovery, celebrate the milestones, cherish those little personalities that are blossoming.
That's beautiful. A great reminder to slow down, be present, and enjoy those precious moments. We'll be back in the next part of the deep dive for even more on early childhood development, so stay tuned. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've spent the last two parts digging into all the changes during early childhood, like brain development and emotions.
It's amazing when you think about it. In just a few years, they go from totally dependent to walking, talking, thinking for themselves, dealing with all kinds of emotions.
Yeah, so much happens. But we also have to remember that not every kid starts at the same place. Like we talked about the challenges, things like poverty and malnutrition, even lead exposure. Those early experiences can really have a lasting impact, good or bad.
Absolutely. And that leads to a really important point. Early childhood development isn't just an individual thing. Social and environmental factors play a huge role. You can't talk about child development without talking about the context.
So it's not just what's going on in their brains, but also the world around them, right? Their relationships, opportunities, challenges, all of it.
Exactly. It's all connected. Think of a child's brain like a seed. It has so much potential to grow, but it needs the right conditions: fertile soil, sunlight, water.
I like that analogy. So the soil would be things like a loving family, a safe environment, good healthcare and education. And the sunlight would be opportunities for play, exploring, interacting with others.
Exactly. And just like a seed without those things struggles to grow, a child without those basic needs is at a disadvantage right from the start.
That's why those early interventions are so important, right?
Yeah.
If we can provide those supports early on, we can give every child a chance to succeed.
Precisely. High-quality early childhood programs can make a world of difference. They give kids the stimulation, nurturing, structure they need to develop, their cognitive, social, and emotional skills. And there's research showing these programs have long-term benefits like better education, better jobs, even better health down the road.
It's like an investment in a child's future, and not just for them, but for society as a whole, really. But we also have to admit that there are some big systemic barriers that prevent kids from getting into those programs.
Absolutely. The cost of childcare is a huge problem for lots of families, and there are those long waiting lists for subsidized programs. We need to do more to make early childhood education accessible and affordable for everyone.
I totally agree. It's an investment that pays off big time. Okay, so we talked about early interventions, but what about the role of parents and caregivers? What can we do every day to help the kids in our lives develop in a healthy way?
Well, one of the most important things is just being present and engaged. Put the phone down, turn off the TV, and really focus on your child. Listen, talk, play, read together. Those everyday interactions are so valuable.
So it's not about fancy toys or tons of activities, but those simple, everyday moments of connection.
Exactly. Kids thrive on love and attention. They need to feel seen, heard, and understood. And they learn so much from just interacting with the people they love.
That's a good reminder. Sometimes life gets so busy that we forget to slow down and appreciate those special moments. But those are the moments that really matter.
You're so right. And remember, you don't have to be perfect. No parent is. What matters most is that you're there for your child, you provide a loving and supportive environment, and you're always learning and growing along with them.
This has been such an amazing deep dive into the world of early childhood development. I mean, it's been eye-opening, inspiring, and honestly, a little bit overwhelming at times. Any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, I think the most important takeaway is that early childhood is a time of incredible potential and possibility. Kids are learning and growing so fast, and they're capable of so much more than we often realize. It's up to us as adults to nurture their development, protect them, and create a world where they can thrive.
That's a beautiful thought. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey. We hope you've learned something new about this amazing stage of life and that you feel inspired by the wonder and possibility of these early years. Thanks for listening.